Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the postseason of the Radical Sim Racing World Finals here this season. After 20 weeks of racing across Europe and America, we've whittled it down to the final 7 who go up into the World Finals. But who will join them in the AM class? We already know, as not enough drivers have proceeded to this stage of the competition. Instead, they'll all go to the World Finals instead. It's the Pro class, though, that still has some deciding to do. 2 drivers from the Americas class, followed by another 9 from the European division, and another 9 invitational drivers will be fighting for places in the World Finals coming up next week here on RaceSpotTV. It's myself, Ian O'Leary, and Ron Miles with you tonight for this RaceSpotTV broadcast, a little bit earlier than we usually are, but be aware of that because we'll be going live exactly the same time, maybe even an hour earlier. Actually, need to double check next week when we go racing for the World Finals itself. Ron, we've already been to Monza on Fridays for our normal broadcasted race, and it was a much different race than what we expected. The leader, Christoph Lipp, ran away and won the race by a long way, and that's not what we're expecting to see here from this circuit. Indeed, from tonight, I wouldn't imagine that is going to be the case, but of course, you never know.
You know, in that Friday 2100 GMT official race that we covered here on RaceSpotTV just the other day, it was a truly insane race as everybody was throwing bare-knuckle fists at one another all throughout as your leader just drove off into the sunset. Here, however, with this World Finals qualifier, some of the best drivers in the Radical SR10 scene on the iRacing platform are here to try and punch their ticket in to that World Finals event in 1 week's time. So as much as we're probably going to have the same bare-knuckle fist fights out there on the racetrack, I don't think anybody's going to be able to run away. We have got a very stacked and very competitive field contending for not a lot of spots.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just talk a little bit about the drivers who are here. You can see some of them on the left-hand side now as we end practice. But, I mean, look at some of the talent that we've got in this field. First of all, from the Americas Championship, it should be Cameron Martineau and Colin Robb in the field. Not sure whether they are in yet, though, and that would put some doubt over whether they will be in at all. But having not gone through the normal season, Andre Castro is going to give it a go. Now, I think from the Americas side of things, Ron, the guys were pretty confident, and, well, no, maybe not confident, but certainly optimistic about their chances in 2025, because Europe has traditionally dominated the World Finals in the last few years, reigning champions as well, of course. Andre Castro, though, to add to their list already of very good drivers. Ryan Odo will be there, of course, alongside driver is Aidan Young, whose name escaped me there for a second. How do you think they will be getting on in the World Finals with Andre Castro here as well? Of course, providing he makes it here tonight, which is the first objective.
See, I feel like there's a renewed effort with that America's stable. In the 2024 Radical World Finals, it was a disappointing contingent from the America's crew, frankly. We only had 2 America's racers participate in that event, as Ryan Odo was the only pro racer, if my memory serves me correctly, as his current teammate and at one point championship rival and 2024 Radical America's champion of Lucas Vieira did not participate in that event. So the America's crew didn't really have the flashy appearance that they wanted last year, and it was doubly disappointing considering the 2 races that we had for the World Finals back in 2024 were both races in the Americas. It was a track that everybody knows, Interlagos, and also VIR, that played host to the World Finals last year. So I think the Americas crew wants to try and stake their claim on a nice result here. I've had a chat with a decent amount of that Americas crew after the Radical Americas broadcast that we were doing throughout this past season, and everybody has that extra spice. They have an extra pep in their step to try and contend for a World Finals crown. Of course, you have Aidan Young, fantastic racer. Honestly, if he plays his cards right, we may very well have to talk about him as a very good real-life racer, too, currently in karts. Ryan Odo, back-to-back seasons in which he's come up short on the championship, but he is always very fast. And also runs in many of the official broadcasted races that we do, so he is no stranger to racing against the European crew that we usually have here in these SR10s. Of course, Andre Castro, your reigning Radical Official Series champion. If he can make his way into the World Finals, he will be a very strong contender, to be sure. So as much as the Europeans have momentum on their back, keep an eye on those Americans to maybe contend.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of the Europeans who are up against him, by the way, here tonight. Franz Sikorski has currently got the best time in this session. Don't see too much of him in the officials, actually, but he is a strong driver. Spent plenty of time on RaceSpotTV, by the way, being broadcasted. Andreas Friedrich is one of those from Europe who will be missing out, and that's a massive one, isn't it, in the number one car? I mean, he's always up there in our own broadcasted races this season. He's got the third best record, I think, from memory. So, yeah, always very, very strong. And, a number of other big names who are always here. Andre Bjorklund as well, always in this series. Kyriakopoulos as well, as Sully Reitonen, George Gonzaga, Rudolf Nagel as well. We don't see too much on Fridays, but we do in this series as well. And those are just the ones who've qualified through the normal method. There have been 9 invitational invites given out. Heinz Braun, one of those. Rafa Blanco, Franco Sanchez-Buckley, Peter Eveny, of those who are probably going to be strong. So, in the list of drivers we've already been outlining here, we've listed more than 10, and that's the amount of spots we've got remaining in the Pro Class for the World Finals. So it's it's going to be a real fight for those top 10 places. But the Europeans have got a real strong contingent here as well, and at the moment they're taking those top 8 places in what is a very, very close practice session for now.
Yeah, I do want to give some love to the driver that's slotted at the back of the pack at the moment here in this practice session. It's Alexander Scaret, a driver who I haven't covered in quite some time on iRacing, but I remember him being very quick in a GT3 series that I was covering way back in the summer of 2023. He is a quick driver, so keep an eye on him in that number 14 car to maybe impress. Alfredo Malo is a driver that I'm keeping tabs on as well. Malo is a driver who I think we have seen pop in occasionally on the official broadcast that we do here for the Radical SR10s, but a driver that I most associate with absolutely ripping around a Formula Renault 3.5. I guess it was just a Formula 3.5 towards the end of that first time in iRacing. I remember one time doing a solo broadcast at Spa for a Formula 3.5 race. It was an official series race, and Alfredo Malo just drove off into the sunset while everybody else ran into some difficulties. Those cars were pretty tough. I'm not sure how they compare to an SR10. I have driven both, but considering you go from open wheel Formula car that's now been discontinued, has gone the way of the Dodo Bird, to the Radical SR10, there's not a lot of comparison there, but I think Alfredo Malo is still going to be a very strong contender regardless if practice is anything to go by.
That hour-long practice session is just drawn to a close now. We'll have to try and work out the 5 drivers who are not here in time for qualifying. Hope none of them have been caught out by the earlier start time than what we normally see, but it's at 1 p.m. Eastern American time and just 7 o'clock Central European time, so it feels like just about the right time for all time zones, unless you're Australian, which where it's a bit difficult, but it always is, of course. It's night time somewhere all the time. So qualifying will get underway, and yeah, it is a slightly shortened race compared to what we've normally seen in the Radical Sim Racing Championship. It's 45 minutes with 2 stops rather than an hour-long race with 2 stops. I think that's probably for the better. I mean, the main criticism that we've had, I suppose, Ron, from these European and America's Championship races so far this season is that the middle minutes, if you like, from between the time of the first pit stop and the second are very quiet. The start of the race, obviously, always very loud, and the end of the race, they're fighting over positions if they're still close together or whatever. But in the middle of the race, there's not much point in fighting because you're waiting for the strategy to filter out. Now, if that part of the race is 25% shorter, because effectively every part of the race is 25% shorter since the race is itself 25% shorter than it was before, then surely that's going to make for a more interesting, more exciting 45 minutes compared to the hour we've had before.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how everybody's going to tackle this event. Going off of what I got to see firsthand last year with the Radical European and America's Championship, when we ran a slightly different format at a 15-minute long sprint race leading into a 45-minute long feature where we only had 1 pit stop for the entirety of that. I have really enjoyed the 1-hour race-long format that we've had throughout the season, the 2 pit stops, even though that mid-sector of the race can be a little bit more on the tame end compared to the start and the finishing stint. I still think it is absolutely a fantastic format. Credit where credit is most certainly due to the people at Radical Sim Racing. They came up with a good format for this season, and even though the middle portion may be a little bit tamer than others, the best way I can compare it, it's like having a bowl of Lucky Charms. You need those small little bran pieces that nobody really likes to make you really appreciate the tasty marshmallows thrown in the midst of all that.
Also, as Björklund comes out the final corner right now, should probably touch on the circuit itself and just how difficult this is going to be to get into the top 10 here. We saw in the race on Friday that it was very, very chaotic indeed, and you know, overtaking is not necessarily going to be a problem, but surely you want to be at the front of the field here to avoid those problems and what could be a bit of a lottery as far as the top 10 goes.
You know, qualifying at Monza, there's pretty much two things you either want to do. You either want to set the quickest time possible, or you may not even bother setting in a qualifying time. If you're a driver that thinks, okay, I'm probably going to qualify directly in the middle of the field, so I'm just going to go have a quick little bite to eat and then come back for the race, because I do not want to find myself in the midst of a strong and very competitive field heading down into the first chicane here at Monza. There are many things that I feel like would be a recipe for disaster, and that is most certainly it. So if I were one of these racers in qualifying, it's pretty much all or nothing for me. I would either want to try and get that pole and go for all that glory, or I would pick up those alternatives in every single one of my qualifying laps, start at the back, and try and pick my way through the smoke and the chaos as they head their way off through the first chicane. Also the second chicane too. As much as the first chicane's brutal, that second chicane can be pretty rough as well.
Good evening to everyone who's watching along at home, by the way, including Jack Dunkovic, who's watching on before next week. In the final on the 23rd of November, we will be racing again for the World Finals itself. This time next week, so make sure you join us for that. We will be going live an hour earlier, so do be wary of that as the first times come in. Alfredo Malo has currently got the best time on the board. Björklund's going to be about 4 tenths adrift, so top 6-ish, and top 4 indeed it is. 4th place, and Kyriakopoulos and Reginald. Not a representative lap time, you'd say, probably for Alexander Toft and Scarrett, but not an immediate time from everybody. Here's Heinz Brunn, who again has got to be one of the big favourites here. Did well at Monza on Friday. Got a podium in our broadcasted race. Another one, indeed. His first one since the opening week. So clearly goes well around here.
Yeah, if there's any time to set in a good performance, it is now for Heinz Braun, so let's see what he can do as he rounds his way through the Parabolica, going out of the final corner onto the start-finish straight away right now, looking all right throughout most of the lap. Let's see what lap time he can set as he comes over the line, muscles his way up the running order. What time is it from him? It's a 143.6. There may have been some sort of invalidation in the midst of that as well, because I don't see him on the board right now, but we still have a little bit more time left to go here in this session, just running through the format. A 10-minute long solo session. These drivers have 4 laps to try and get the job done, so that is slightly different from the regular 2 that they have in the officials, and that will be a very good time indeed, because these cars usually take about 2 to 3 laps to actually get up to temperature when it comes to the tires and the brakes.
Coming down towards the final corner then for Rafael Blanco. One of our invitational drivers. Didn't go through the normal qualification procedure for the 10 rounds of European or America's competition this season. Poulos moves up meantime. There's a whole load of new times come in. Buckley goes to 4th, but this is a good time from Blanco. Or at least it would have been compared to the other times that weren't before. Everyone's got a bit quicker. So Blanco is still only 11th. Sully Rettinen goes quickly as well. He's up to 2nd place. But I must say, Alfredo Malo is not a driver I've seen at all, really, in Radical before, or anything, indeed. But suddenly seems to be very quick in a 42.8 at the top of these timing sheets for now.
Yeah, Malo's super quick in all sorts of different race cars that they put him in, so I think he's going to be a strong contender throughout, as we still have yet to see Heinz Braun put in a qualifying time. I think he's looking a little bit slower on this lap than he has in some of his previous attempts. I think he's just looking to bring it across the line and actually get a time set on the board, even if it's not that quick. Just have a time in your back pocket so you don't start all the way at the back. But Heinz Braun slaps himself in P11 on that first time on the board, about 0.7 of a second off of the pole. This field is incredibly close, with all 14 drivers to set time covered by less than 1.2 seconds. That is madness.
Yeah. I know it's not the most technical circuit in the world, but it's quite a long circuit, and you know it is impressive that we are so close across the board. Still no time from Sikorsky, who will now finally get a lap in, you'd imagine, in the next few moments. Over the line for Castro. That is... Oh, is that a tied time? No, not quite. It's just quicker. Oh, initially, I thought it was going to be tied with Marlowe. 0.003 faster it is in the end for Andre Castro, who, as I say, wasn't quite as strong in practice as maybe he's showing to be in qualifying. Maybe he was just doing race runs throughout the previous hour because he's now on the provisional pole.
Yeah, Castro doing everything that he needs to do in this session to turn up the wick, peak at the right time, and set in a good run. Let's see what Franek Sikorsky can do in that number 8 machine. You can see just the tightness in the face. He is focused on setting in a good time, and let's see what he can do as he comes at Parapolica and heads towards the line.
That's his first time, and it's a good time. Just 2 temps off will get him 6th with this session, so that's 8 Europeans and 7 Europeans and 3 from the Americas region, currently inside the top 10. See, Sanchez and Blanco, presuming these flags are all correct, are not from North America, but from the Americas, as it were. So they've snuck into the top 10 for now. It's going to be very close. So Heinz Braun currently stuck in 12th. They're within 0.4 of a second, and you can still be outside of the top 10. It's just kind of goes to what you were saying earlier, Ron, about the closeness of this session. It's just absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, and even though this track is known for being one where straight line speed is so dependent, it really speaks volumes about the competitiveness of this field. The fact that even through the turns and the tight and twisties of this racetrack, they can keep it super tight. Now, I do want to keep everybody up to speed that this is an event with a fixed setup, much like the officials and also the European and America's championships. So that does help out this field be very close, but even then, it's just speaks volumes to the talent pool that we have got in this series. The fact that they are all as close and tight-knit as they are. Peter, even he comes across the line, remains in P5 at the moment in that number 5 car, as we're still looking to see what Heinz Braun can do out there on the circuit. I think this may be one of his final laps, currently slotted in 12th, 0.4 of a second off of the pole. That is why. That's a wild sentence to say.
Yeah. Well, let's see if he can make that even closer here as he now runs out of Ascarian on the way towards the Parabolica itself. It's been a decent session in terms of the lap time itself from Heinz Braun in the low 43s, but he's going to need better than that if he wants to be in the top 10 at the end of the afternoon. May not need to even worry about this too much because there is a 45-minute race coming up off the back of it, but Heinz Braun will not want to be in the midfield and in the danger zone. Over the line, it's close again, but is it any quicker? It's quicker, but not enough. He stays in 12th, and one of the pre-race favourites is going to be starting on row 6. That is going to be a difficult and nervy beginning for one of the pre-race favourites here, certainly to make it into the top 10 this afternoon. It's Andre Castro who takes pole with a 42.8, with Alfredo Marlowe, perhaps the surprise of the session, only 3 thousandths behind. Sully Ruttinen and Andreas Friedrich on an all-European row 2, with Peter Evendy and Franek Sikorsky on row 3. Just into the 43s now, and Franco Sanchez Buckley in 7th. George Gonzaga with Denis Kiriakopoulos, his teammate, behind him in 9th. Rafael Blanco, one of the Americans' drivers, is in 10th. Kim-Andre Bueldon and Heinz Braun are perhaps surprises to be outside the top 10. Mehmet Barakas, Bruno Vitorino and Alexander Toppenskarret have got work to do from the final 3, but even they were not too far away. Toppenskarret, the only driver over a second off of the pole. 25 degrees Celsius, perfect conditions for racing here, perfect conditions for finding the final 10 in the World Finals next week.
Yeah, this is going to be a great day of action, a super close field, a super competitive field, lots of very talented drivers from the pole all the way back down to the tail end of this field, and a super long run down to turn number 1 that is going to be hair-raising for us in the broadcast booth, and probably terrifying for these racers out there on circuit 2. That runoff into 1 probably going to get used quite a lot too. We saw in the official broadcast last Friday, James Berry having to utilize that runoff, Berry heading down into turn number 1, but we didn't see anybody have a full-on parking lot fest heading down in there. So let's find out. I think the tension is certainly building in this field. Everybody knows what's at stake, and everybody wants to have a darn good shot to get done. Whether you're a racer who's running the championships all throughout 2025, or you've been invited into this race, this is the time to have a good day in the cockpit, set in some good laps, and be up towards the front of the field inside that top 10 at the very end.
45 minutes to decide 10 more spots in the Radical Sim Racing World Finals in 2025. We're underway. Andre Castro from the front, getting off to a good start. Sikorsky gets away pretty slowly on the second row, though. Further down, it's 3 wide. Here for second place, and just edged out there is the 7 car of Sully Rutgenen, who wanted a clear shot into turn 1. He's not going to get it. Castro inside is going to take the lead ahead of Marlowe. In towards turn 1, there's a spin. There's contact as Andreas Friedrich and Sully Rutgenen make contact. I don't think there's a spin there for Friedrich. He'll get away with it. There's more contact now as they run up towards the curve of ground lane for the first time. Peter Even, oh no! Peter Even, he's gone around, so is Bjorklund. Mehmet Beradakis is struggling to pick his way through it. Oh, Peter Even, he's gone. And there's a front end missing here as well for Sikorsky. In 6th position, he's going to have to limp to the pit stops by the looks of it here. As there's trouble on the opening lap, there's a big road back now for some of those fancy drivers now at the back end of the field.
Yeah, and Peter Even, he is towed back to pit lane, so any chance that he had of making it into the 2025 Radical Sim Racing World Finals have been dashed. Kevin and Bjorklund, Dennis Kyriakopoulos both involved in that incident. So too was Rafa Blanco, but big damage to Franek Sikorsky's car. Look at the front end completely missing off of that race car. Now that is bad on a good day, but in an SR10 at Monza, that is virtually a game ender. He's going to have to come in to serve any sort of fast repair, get that car repaired, because that is going to be a game ender if he stays down track like that.
Yeah, luckily this pit stop, the settings, the way that we have them, the cycle of 2 pit stops means that he does still have a chance, but he's got no straight line speed. Gonzaga and Vitorino go straight past him. This is how it happened. Bjorklund makes contact with Eveny, who's coming back onto the circuit after a stack up in front of him. Bjorklund gets involved in it. That's a massive smash up there for somebody getting into Eveny, who just toes back to the pit lane and says that is enough. Kyriakopoulos and Blanco with the other 2, by the way, making their way through the gravel, as Sikorsky does not come in. Or does he? Is he that slow that it looks like he's into the pit lane yet, and he just isn't? I'm not sure at the moment. It's not clear to me whether Sikorsky has come into the pit lane or he has. So Sikorsky's in, so is Kyriakopoulos, Blanco and Bjorklund. Everybody involved in that lap 1 incident there had to come into pit lane, and that's no surprise.
And Sikorsky now out and away in live time, but that is going to be a disaster for him to try and come back from, as we see Rafael Blanco's perspective and all that. A past Radical Esports Cup champion in the officials. Again, learning the lesson the hard way about how Monza can strike and strike hard. Think about the amount of talent that we've got outside of the top 10. We've got the inert driver in the form of Dennis Kyriakopoulos. That inert team that Andreas Friedrich is part of is usually just an absolute powerhouse. But as of recent, certainly here in 2025, we've seen them begin to struggle. A lot of inert drivers are involved in this event. Dennis Kyriakopoulos, he's on the outside looking in. Currently, George Gonzaga is slotted in 8th. Andreas Friedrich runs inside the top 5. Usually don't see the inert team struggle this badly. In fact, Andreas Friedrich was pretty much a surefire lock, one of the drivers involved in the championship battle last season in the European Series.
And look at the working together now of Castro and Marlowe at the front of the field. Trying to get away as best as they can from the carnage. There you can see the line, by the way, the transfer line for the top 10. Unfortunately, this may well just stop the battles for at least the moment. Mehmet Beradakis wants to get past Alexander Totten-Skarrett, who'll be very pleased to be in the top 10, and Castro and Marlowe just exchange places at the front of the field. Braun goes past Vitorino as well for 6th place. He believes he can give chase a little bit better if he's in 6th, and he's probably right as he goes through on the inside himself. So there is going to be a little bit of working together here before they all run out of fuel, and they'll all have to come into pit lane. Maybe even it's all going to happen on the same lap here later on.
And now, considering how quick of a racetrack this is, there could be a whole lot of opportunities for these competitors to maybe do a little bit of fuel saving. Maybe that's what Andre Castro is doing, running right behind Alfredo Malo in that second spot, just saying, you know what, I'm going to take it easy, enjoy the draft, maybe do a little bit of lifting and coasting, hang down into these turns. That won't be the worst strategy in the world. That could be how Andre Castro wins this race and punches his ticket into that Radical World Finals event in just 1 week's time. We've seen throughout this season how strategy can affect you both in the European and America's championships. It's quite fitting that we get into the World Finals qualifier, and it could be strategy that decides your spot in that World Finals event.
It will come down to that a little bit, this strategy that we've seen all year. And it's not going to end now. By the way, for the World Finals itself, we are going to see 2 pit stops in the first race for each of the AM and the Pro classes, which will be split, by the way, next week when we're racing in the World Finals. So do be wary of that as we move forward. This is just the Pro field, as I mentioned earlier. All of the AM drivers who qualified for the qualifier itself have all been transferred to the main event next week without a race, which would have been taking place an hour ago had we been doing that format, but we're not. Change for the lead as Castro gets past Marlowe, and change for third and for 6th. Vitorino back past Braun. Sanchez and Reitinen look to be going side by side indeed there, maybe through the chicane. No, they weren't. Sanchez got up to third without too much trouble in the end. So there's a lot happening back here. I think the one positive for those outside the top 5, other than Evany, who is out of the race. Totten Scarrett showed in qualifying, and it's starting to show, I think, early on in this race that maybe can't quite stick with the pace of these 10 at the front of the field. So there's at least one spot for the others to look at and think, you know, we could very much catch him and overtake him before the end.
You know, when I was speaking about Alexander Scarrett right towards the top of the show, about the talented racer that he is behind the wheel of GT3 machinery, a GT3 car is very different from a Radical SR10. I think the only GT3 racer I have seen truly excel and adore an SR10 is our RaceSpotTV colleague and Radical America's and competitor Jared Gregory, who's going to be out there on the racetrack for the World Finals in just 1 week's time. But outside of that, you don't really see a GT3 to SR10 crossover. It's usually an LMP3 to SR10 crossover. I've seen many an SR10 racer do good in an LMP3. I've seen many LMP3 racers do good in an SR10. They have a similar sort of feel, tend a bit more towards the understeer in these race cars. The brakes can be a little bit touch and go, and the tires do take a decent amount of time to fully get up to temp. But I think, unfortunately for Alexander Scarrett, his background in sim racing maybe just be too different to really excel in this SR10. So we see once again a swapperoo between Malo and Castro. I think they're working together in a pseudo-truce at the moment.
Yeah, they certainly are. Now, it's that battle for 6th place that's starting to take place. George Gonzaga is fed up of Braun and Vitorino continuing this, and he's going for it himself. He goes to 6th, and there's a bit of smoke there as Sanchez doesn't want to give his 3rd place up right now, and Reitinen is fighting with him. Now, again, I thought they'd be staying in line and working together here, but no, they are side-by-side racing. And they are, they're properly battling here for 3rd position. Not that it really matters where they finish in this race. Mehmet Perodakis goes past Bruno Vitorino as well, who's lost 3 positions now on this lap. But again, I think he won't be too concerned about that this time around because, it's all to play out a little bit later on. And the top 10 is not going to be decided yet. Even if it was, he'd be fairly pleased with that situation. That's a big slide for Reitinen as he goes through Lesmo 2. This is a race in which you cannot afford mistakes, as we've already seen.
Yeah, you cannot win the race in the first stint, but you sure can lose it. For the racers outside of the top 10, the gap between Alexander Scarrett holding on to that final spot into the World Finals in P10 to Sikorsky slotted in 11. That is a vast yawning chasm at the moment, about 23 seconds a gap between those competitors. Now, I gotta wonder, what is it going to take for that top 10 to get shuffled up? Is it going to be any of the racers in the top 10 running into their own difficulties, or will the racers outside of it that ran into the troubles earlier, will they maybe be able to put their nose to the grindstone and make their way back up? It's a huge amount of time that they have to try and reclaim, but we have seen stranger things throughout this season.
Side by side again. As behind, Braun wants that place back from Gonzaga, and he gets it. So they have left Vitorino behind, and that's why they were so unimpressed at Vitorino continuing to re-overtake them here. They wanted to get away from this. They want to let those guys fight for those final spots inside the top 10, and they don't want to be involved in it. Now, as we've seen again in these regular season races, I do wonder how much fuel they're going to take on first time round, because there's a lot of wiggle room here. You don't have to take on 2 full tanks each time, far from it. You can take on very little fuel actually in the first stint and just bridge that way until the final stint. So I wonder what they're going to do at the front. Are they going to take on the full fuel load, or are they going to try and keep it as short as possible to distance those who are outside the top 5 right now as much as they can?
Yes, in the heads of these racers, there are so many different permutations being run. They're thinking, okay, how do I go about the rest of this race on track? How do I try and tackle the strategy? As I said a few moments ago, the strategy was also important throughout the European and America's championships here in the 2025, that it is quite fitting that going into the World Finals qualifier and the World Finals itself, in fact, the strategy is once again going to be very, very important for these racers. I think the main strategy they're worrying about, though, is just knowing exactly where to position their cars and where to push, because you do have some rather compelling battles throughout this field, some competitive battles to be sure as well. And in the heat of competition, in these very closely knit packs, there can be some fisticuffs that can break out. So going back to what I said, you can't win the race in the first stint, but you sure can lose it. I think these racers have to focus on that strategy and also just about keeping their car on the road.
Again, more amicable positions being changed further down the field here as they continue to fight in this top 10 right now, which is going to run long in this first stint, as long as they possibly can, towards 1/3 distance in this race. But I don't think they'll make it all the way there. Here comes Berat Akers again on Braun, and he just backed out of it. So they're leaving Bruno Vitorino behind. They're also leaving Alexander Totten-Scarrett behind as well. So the fight might actually be between the top 2 of that outside the top 10 4. Sikorsky, Kyriakopoulos, Blanco and Björklund. I would say that all 4 of them are probably quicker than those 2 in the bottom of the top 10 right now. So they'll be fighting over those places, but they've not taken the set. Well, Sikorsky, sorry, has taken less fuel, or the same as everybody else, but he is a long way out in front of the others. Kyriakopoulos only in front of Rafa Blanco at the moment, and Björklund with it all to do. There's Peter Eveny, who unfortunately is out of the race, and his campaign for 2025 comes to an end about 45 minutes before, at least 45 minutes before he was hoping it would.
Yeah, it's a shame for Peter Eveny, a very talented racer in the officials, but I don't think we'll be seeing him compete for a World Finals crown in 1 week's time. Some side-by-side battling with Heinz Braun and George Gonzaga, meanwhile, as they headed their way into Parabolica. That's been a swap through at the front of that pack right behind, as Berat Akers is also going to get involved in that too. I thought I was just going to see a driver strike the pit attenuator as Franco Sanchez got very, very close. But as this battling is going on, I do want to pull in a little bit of color, talking about the battling for the final few spots. Actually, I'm going to hold off on that. George Gonzaga making the call to come down pit lane. That's rather fascinating to see.
Yeah, a little bit earlier than the others. He's certainly Rutten is in as well, although I don't think it's showing on the right-hand side. I think he is in as well. 9.4 for Gonzaga. And where is Rutten gone? He is 12 seconds in pit lane. 13, 14, it goes longer. And there he goes, out the pit lane now. So Rutten spends 14.5 seconds in pit lane, and that's going to send him a long way back here. He's even behind Sikorsky now. So, yeah, that's a slightly longer stop this time from Rutten, expecting to go a little bit deeper into this part of the race than what the others are going to manage. You would have thought, though, with those guys pitching in a lap or two earlier, that this is probably the time now, and we might even see everybody in pit lane this time round.
Yeah, seeing those drivers break away from their own little battles, I wonder if we're going to see everybody come down pit lane in the next couple of laps, or whether or not that was a slightly off-kilter call from them, kind of breaking away from the battling that was getting very intense between them. They said, nope, I want to keep it clean. I want to keep it on the road. I'm going to pull down pit lane and not have to worry about any sort of drama like that. I was just going to say, kind of talking about the lap times for the racers a little bit farther in the back of the top 10 and right outside at Sikorsky was lapping about a second quicker than Alexander Skaret. So it may come down to some mistakes that may affect that battle. As there we go, that's a pit stop from Andres Friedrich as he runs down pit lane now.
Yep, so still waiting for the top 7 now. It will be the top 7. And Vitorino and Tom Scarrett make their way through, unless they too are going to come into the pit lane, and indeed they will. So just the top 5 now we're waiting for. And Andres Friedrich has survived a scare already tonight as he came through turn 2. We saw it there on the opening lap. Very nearly got tipped all the way round into a spin by Sully Retten, and he will be counting his lucky stars that he wasn't spun all the way around in front of the field and put to the back of the pack. Sikorsky, interestingly, gets past everybody, so clearly he wasn't too delayed by lap 1, but decided to pit in anyway, and he's in a decent position here.
Yeah, running in a very good spot. You don't have to have a perfectly clean run throughout this race, but if you can think on your feet and bounce back from adversity, that could very easily get you a spot in the World Finals. This is the first time that I've seen Franek Sikorsky out there on the road, I believe in my entire broadcasting career, but he's proven himself to be very, very quick. So keep an eye on the pole to try and run his way farther up the road as we get further along in this event. Currently top of the cars that have come down pit lane has certainly shown some pace already behind the wheel of that 8th machine.
So is it going to be this time for Marlowe and Castro? With less than half an hour remaining, we'd be over halfway through the race at this point if it was the hour-long races we've seen so far this season, but no, just a third of the way through, and you'd expect to have seen pit stops by now, I must be honest, but Andre Castro's in. Marlowe carries on for one more. Heinz Braun and Franco Sanchez also in, so now just 2, the top 2 we're waiting for. Pitch even he's still down on pit lane, to be fair. Just obstructing Castro's view a little bit. He's parked in his box in such a way that means he's going to have to turn very tightly. And there he goes. Good job he can drive through the safety car. And he will come out in front of Sikorsky, but he's one of the only drivers who will. I imagine Alfredo Malo might be the only other one who will. Pit stops are varying between 7.5, which what we saw there from Castro, and 15 and a bit from Vitorino and Totten Scarrett there. So very short stops and very late stops to come from them in the near future, but it's so hard to read at the moment, this race. They always are when there's 2 pit stops, and everybody's got a different pit stop time to go through with in the final part of this race. Vitorino down the inside and through on Kyriakopoulos. It's for the top 10 right now, but will it be later? Nobody knows for the moment, including these 2.
And as we get through this pit cycle with the top 2 split and everybody a lot closer than they once were, I will bring this discussion back into the fold. You could very well see mistakes decide the fate of all of these racers, as here we go side by side. That's Kyriakopoulos jumping his way up into that top 10 spot over Bruno Vitorino, heading into the second chicane. But no, at this point in the race, with drivers as closely knit as they are, a small little bit of contact, a small little mistake, even for the racers that have had a perfectly smooth and clean run up to this point in the event, that could affect it. And one thing that we do have to bring up with some of the racers being invited in here to this event, they may not be familiar with the usual sequence of events that go down with these pit stops. You can't take tires in these cars. The tires are stone hard, so you don't really have to come down pit lane for tires. And we even saw your eventual Radical America's Pro Champion, Aiden Young, make that mistake in his debut race at the Norderschleife all the way back in the spring of this year. Made that mistake, lost out on a shot at victory. We could very well see that rear its head today.
So Castro retakes the lead by some distance as Marlowe takes a very long stop, the longest of the day. 17.6 in the box for him, and Sikorsky's going to get past him even. That is a very long stop indeed. He will be going exceptionally deep into this race, that's for sure. Then it's Friedrich and Gonzaga just behind them. They'll be working together. Heinz Braun is now behind Mehmet Beredakis, and Reitinen as well, just in behind them as well. 6th, 7th and 8th, there they are. Then Sanchez, who's on his own. Then it's Kyriakopoulos, who's still with Vitorino, as we saw. Blanco and Totten Scarrett nose to tail as well here, although Totten Scarrett has taken a very long stop. Blanco has only just recently passed him. And Kim Andre Bjorklund is coming up to them as well. The whole field covered by less than 30 seconds. But as I mentioned, It's very, very hard to read this race at the moment as far as who is going to come out in the top 10 in 25 minutes' time.
Yes, so a lot of things can turn on their head, and I think everybody is kind of braced for that too. They're thinking, okay, something's going to hit the fan, something is going to go massively awry, whether it be Alfredo Malo, who is probably expecting to come out of the pits with the lead and find himself all the way down in third as a result of a super slow run down pit lane, whether it be some other racers who exited out in a spot that they maybe weren't expecting in a good way or weren't expecting in a bad way. Doesn't matter what it is, these racers have to stay mentally sharp throughout this event, make sure they can think on their feet and bounce back from any sort of adversity that may fall their way. Looking at some battling here with Heinz Braun and Selly riding in two racers that we know are usually a bit on the aggressive end when it comes to the official races that they're a part of, but not going to see an aggressive move from Brian, and he backs out of it as they head their way into Parabolica. But this battle for 7th may turn into a battle for 6th if they can catch Mehmet Barat-Akis right in front. Second tries to charm, I apologize.
Gonzaga gets past Frujic further out, but that's working together, I would imagine. Rotanen coming straight back past Heinz Braun here into 7th in the number 7, and Braun lets him have that one as well. So changes happening here all the time throughout the top 10, and indeed just outside of it. So the first stops we should see will probably be from the likes of Blanco or Björklund or even Kyriakopoulos as well. They should be the first ones in, but how long are we going to wait before we see them come into the pit lane, I wonder? Well, probably not very long with the amount of time we've got remaining. We'll probably just go dip over halfway, maybe into the final 20, but not too much further than that, and then it will all come very, very quickly indeed. So, those who have done a long stop outside the top 10 who could vault their way in include Bruno Vitorino and Alexander Toppen-Scarrett, and they may well replace the likes of Kyriakopoulos, who's had a very short first stop so far, maybe even Gonzaga, unless he can get far enough in front of them. He's done quite a short stop as well. Other than that, you're looking at guys like maybe Friedrich, but again, quite a long way in front of Vitorino and Toppen-Scarrett. I think as it stands, the only thing that would change as far as the top 10 is concerned is this battle would reverse, and Kyriakopoulos would be behind Vitorino. I don't know if you agree, but Vitorino had his stop about double the length of Kyriakopoulos first time round, and it was 7 laps later, so I think he's in a bit more of an open position as far as the strategy goes.
I think it may all come down to a matter of those pit stops and certainly pace as well. We talk about the pace of these racers that they're on the circuit, and going back to the discussion of mistakes, if you don't feel comfortable in these SR10s, these are a car that will put you on your butt. This is a car, I should say, to bring in some proper grammar, but there's a car that can put you on your butt rather quickly if you don't feel confident driving around here. So as much as most certainly the strategy is going to affect these racers, if they aren't feeling comfortable at the end, we could very well see a mistake affect these battles, whether it be the battle inside of the top 10 or the battle just to get inside of the top 10. These two going to be the ones that we keep our eyes on throughout, along with the driver a little bit farther up the road of Franco Sanchez. Sanchez was nearly a championship contender in the 2024 Radical Americas Championship, so the fact he finds himself in this event is just primarily down to the fact that he didn't really, I don't think he started a single race in the Radical Americas Championship this season, which I think is a bit of a shame. He's a good racer in that Firebird SimRacing stable, but right now he is just barely clinging on to a top 10 spot.
Oh, that was a bit side by side, or at least a look from Braun on Rotanen. But as things stand, we have got two Americas drivers and 8 Europeans going into the World Finals. As I mentioned, I think Vitorino and Kyriakopoulos could change, switch out that 10th place to give Americas 3. I think it's going to be a close fight this year, because some of these may even end up being favourites for the finals itself. Some of them have gotten an invitation here, even despite not having done the regular season. Thinking about guys like Braun and Blanco, who initially are from Europe and Americas respectively, but it's not inconceivable they could mix it up, as there goes Rotanen past Barat-Akis, and the working together has paid off there for Rotanen and Braun, because they've caught up and passed now Mehmet Barat-Akis, who had a slightly shorter pit stop than them first time round, so that's just reversing that change that went on throughout the pit stops. And indeed, Akos will be into the pit lane a little bit earlier when they get round to that as well. So it's all going to be sorted out here in the next few 20 minutes, really. But for now, the waiting period continues, and the top 10 remains very unclear.
And we nearly saw 2 overtakes on the same straightaway there, as I thought we were going to see Heinz Braun get a move done on Mehmet Berat in the same flat-out blast heading down into turn number 1. We did not, although they are most certainly close, about 0.4 of a second separate Reitnen from Akis and then Akis from Braun. So still very close throughout to this field. We'll have to keep tabs on these racers and how the battle shake out. I think up in the front it is rather smooth. Farther behind, though, the tension is starting to raise as Franco Sanchez, I think I heard him keying and calling over the iRacing radio. Not sure what he said, but he has lost out on that spot to Dennis Kiriakopoulos. There's a little bit of pseudo teamwork going on there as side-by-side racing got flare up with Berat trying to hold off the challenge from Braun, and he won't be able to do it.
Yeah, Braun straight through, and well, Mehmet Berat in a bit of trouble at the moment. We'll see whether he responds by pitting. No, he's going to battle. Well, does he believe this is the last spot inside the top 10 that it's going to filter out to later? I think they should be relaxed a little bit here and not fight, but Braun's going for it, and so is Mehmet Berat trying to go in the middle of them. And Solly Rutsinen won't want that happening because he knows that he's quicker. He's still on the inside at turn number 2 here, and they're battling themselves out of a battle here with Heinz Braun for 6th. They're dragging themselves closer to those 3 in the background in 9th, 10th and 11th, who are fighting for the last spots inside the World Finals next week. It's still inside line for Mehmet Berat, who is going to surely get the outside for the next chicane. And will that mean position as well? No, Rutinen's still there. They are staring each other into the abyss right now as Rutinen on the outside now for the 2 Lesmos. He's finally going to have to give it up. After losing 2 seconds, he still doesn't get the return of the place, and they've dragged themselves much, much closer to danger.
Yeah, they have dragged themselves off of a cliff. You look at the gap farther up the road now, they've lost out on the draft, and it will not be very long if they continue to battle before Franco Sanchez, Dennis Kiriakopoulos, and Bruno Vitorino will close up that gap, get in the draft, and that's going to be a 5-car battle for 7th in the blink of an eye. So those two not playing ball with each other one bit, which can't necessarily say I'm too surprised here in the World Finals qualifier. Everybody wants to get any single spot that they can, but sometimes you do have to play that give and take game, play that game of leapfrog at the right time so you can make sure that you don't lose out on a whole lot of time, as Sikorsky has come down pit lane from 2nd.
So here we go. He was likely to be one of the first, and expect to see also some stops here. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's close. Very close. As Blanco and Vitorino come in at the same time. Wow, that was very, very close. So Castro, Sikorsky, Reitinen, Kiriakopoulos, Vitorino, Blanco all into the pit lane. And Castro immediately on his way back out, and he's still in 8th place. So he's absolutely secure at the moment. Unless he makes a mistake, he'll be in the World Finals next week. And that won't be much of a surprise, I don't think. Not to many. Here comes Sikorsky. He's made a very early stop work, hasn't he? 15.4 that time round. He's a long way behind Castro now, but he should be safely in the top 10 as well. Same for Reitinen. And now the waiting game begins for Vitorino, Kiriakopoulos, Blanco and Bjorklund. They've made their final stops of the day. Yes, there are enough drivers still to stop to come out behind them, but they do not know how many are going to stop and come out behind them at this point. So they've got to race on as quickly as they can and hope they filter out inside the top 10.
And now we're still waiting for the rest of the field to come down pit lane, but I think we're getting a good picture as to what drivers are going to be safe and what drivers are going to be in the danger zone of either losing out on a spot in the World Finals or they're out of that spot entirely. Of the 14 cars out there on the racetrack, I would probably say that only about 3 to 5 of them have a good feeling about the fact that they're going to be making it into the World Finals next week. Everybody else, though, they're either feeling slightly uneasy or they are truly in the danger zone. Other racers a little bit farther behind, the likes of Kim Andre and Bjorklund and Rafa Blanco, they're pretty much just hoping for a Christmas miracle to befall them between now and the checkered flag.
So Gonzaga, sorry, not Gonzaga. Yes, it's Gonzaga in the pit lane rather. And same for Heinz Braun. So going to happen very quickly here. The final pit stop window is nowhere near as spread as it is if you do an hour, but obviously that makes sense because everything in this race is a bit smaller. If you like, 45 minutes compared to the hour. But anyway, here we go. Press the engine, and will he get going before Gonzaga? He does. He gets ahead of him, in fact. Gonzaga's got a very long stop here, and wow, that is long. 5 seconds. Gonzaga's going to be very worried here, as Sikorski's going to get through. Sully Ratchet, no, he should be fine, actually. Sully Ratchet will be on his way, but Gonzaga should remain inside the top 10. So nobody outside the top 10 promoted through that cycle of pit stops. Vitorino will really be eager now to see who is going to be stopping, and if anybody is going to come out behind him. Will Totten Scarrett come out behind him? I suspect that he might do, but these final stops are going to be very, very short. This is very, 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 very nail-biting indeed. Vitorino unable to do anything as it stands right now to promote himself into the top 10.
And now we get into the very end, the final stint in this race. Everybody at this point in time really knows what they have to do. For some, they pretty much just have to hope for perfection. Others just need to keep it on the road, while some racers are hoping for lightning to come down and strike their competitors off the circuit. Now that we have a good picture as to how this race is going to befold, I think everybody knows what they got to do. They can set goals for themselves. So as much as we have seen the aggression really get cranked up, I think we're going to see these racers be the most confident now than they ever really have been in this event, because they know what sort of goals, they know what they have to race to.
Mehmet Beradakis gets past Andreas Friedrich because he's in the pit lane now. So our latest driver to stop and hope that they're still going to be in the top 10 by the end of it. And here come... No, Totten Scarrett stays out again in the background. That's a bit nicer position, by the way, from Friedrich, unlike what we've seen from Castro time and again in this race, where he's almost put himself in the wall. So here they come. You can see them in the background. Where's Vitorino? Still 10 seconds down the road, and there's not that much further to go for Friedrich to get to the end of the pit lane. He'll be okay. Braun and Gonzaga and Regenin rather, in the background will be coming up on him very quickly here, and they're side by side, in fact. A bit of defence. These are the last spots inside the top 10, and they're getting nervous. Here we go in towards turn 1, and they're all safe for now. Friedrich in 8th place will breathe a big sigh of relief at the end of this one. Another few pit stops gone. Still just 4 to go here in this World Finals qualifier.
You know, with 14 minutes left on the clock, the time is ticking down. Don't even have the length of the usual officials, but unlike those official races, which can be a bit tense, I think the tension is going to be even higher in this, frankly. One small trip up around this track, one small mistake, an excursion off into the gravel trap, and your hopes of making it into the Radical Sim Racing World Finals in 2025 are going to be dashed. So as much as these racers that we have on screen right now, this pack of Heinz Braun, Andres Friedrich, Sally Reinen, and George Gonzaga, as much as they have a quite comfortable gap to Bruno Vitorino right in tow, they want to make sure they can keep that gap as high as they can and make sure you can keep your race car on the road. One trip up, one mistake from these veteran drivers, and their race can go down the tubes.
13 minutes remaining, and these are the last guys inside the top 10 right now. They're not going to be fighting at all, you can imagine, given the danger that they're in. Top 10 is enough, but they cannot afford any mistakes here that would drag them below that cut line. At the moment, Totten Scarrett still would be the most, the one in most danger at this stage in the race, but it should be Mehmet Beradakis who's in next. Scarrett shouldn't be too far behind him in the pit lane. Should see Marlowe go quite far. He took the longest pit stop of anybody throughout the entire race so far, 17.6 seconds. I think a few will be wondering how he managed to get that much fuel into that car, because there's obviously a limit on the fuel tanks here that is even more constraining than what we've seen throughout the European and America's Championship so far, as you'd expect. This is a different race, and I've got to say, an exciting race so far. I'd say that those sort of middle minutes where the not much is happening and everybody's waiting for the final pit stops were actually quite short this time round, so perhaps that's an improvement on the hour-long races.
Yeah, I wonder what sort of format changes we may have for the 2026 Road to the World Finals. As I said a little bit earlier on the show, the 2024 format, a bit different to this. Even the 45-minute long feature only had one pit stop that year, so it was a little bit dull at certain points in time during that, but this two-stop format has really worked. Even though these drivers have to run into the pits more often than not, it is still giving us a whole lot of excitement. See, I was going to make a Monty Python's Flying Circus reference and the Monty Python's Olympics, but then I remembered a lesson that you taught me very early on in us doing broadcast together, Ewan, and that is that you don't really get too many pop culture references, even Monty Python.
Indeed. I would not you can still make them for the rest of the class, but I'm just not going to be enjoying them with everybody else. Mehmet Barakas is in the pit lane meantime, and he will hope to stay in the top 10. He's probably going to be 10th. That's going to be a bit nervy for Mehmet Barakas here, and that will therefore worry Sanchez and Stoffel Scarrett. There goes the battle in the last parts of the top 10. Gonzaga goes past. So those guys will feel a little bit more secure now, given that the driver who was running second has just come out behind them. But how long are those stops for Buckley and Totten Scarrett? Will they be shorter because their first stops were longer than Mehmet Barakas? Again, worrying times for these guys in around this position. And again, Vitorino gets a little bit closer. He's 4 seconds at the moment away from a place in the World Finals.
Yeah, the one thing that Vitorino does not have at the moment is just the draft. If you can close up that gap, 4.2 seconds at the moment, if you can maybe rely on these racers battling harder as they get to the end, he can maybe have a shot at breaking through, but that is a big asterisk next to that. I'm gonna look through the lap times that he's been able to set at this stage of the race too, just kind of looking through what some of the last times Vitorino has set. Last time by was a 143.7 for the driver of the number 27 effort, and then going a little bit farther up the road to find the likes of George Gonzaga and others. They were in the 142s. They're in that train of cars with the strong draft, and that is just towing these cars along. We see week in and week out, doesn't matter what track we're at, Ewan, the draft is always apocalyptically strong in these SR10s. So if you don't have that advantage, it's pretty much like trying to overtake a truck on the highway while you're trying to do it all in 6th gear using about 50% throttle at most.
So less than 10 minutes to go, and it's going to be a very short splash and dash, you'd imagine, from some of those out front. What are these guys going to do, though? 3 wide as we come down the pit straight, and that surely is going to slow these guys down and back them in towards Mehmet Barakas, who will not be pleased to see this. Bruno Vitorino certainly will be. Side by side is close, as around the outside for Braun gets the position. That's 7th place for now, in front of Andreas Friedrich, and then George Gonzaga, and that gives Mehmet Barakas a bit of slipstream here. And to be fair, he is pulling a little bit further away from those guys behind, like Vitorino, who is currently in 11th position. Again, we're not sure where Sanchez or Totten Scarrett are going to be, whether they could even be behind the Turkish driver at the moment, but this is going to slow these guys down if they're not too careful.
Yeah, they need to keep an eye on it. As we saw a little bit earlier on in the battle involving Mehmet Barakas and how much he and the other driver that he was side by side with at the time were slowing each other up as a result of that squabbling. These competitors have to keep that in mind. As much as Bruno Vitorino doesn't have the pace to catch these racers up on the road because he doesn't have that draft and continues to lose time as a result, if these racers start to battle hard, not only are you going to see them pretty much drag each other down as if they have anchors tied at the ankle, you're also going to start to see the risk of incident begin to creep up. We saw the drama at the start of this race, and many racers get caught out by it, but as we get to the end, the tension is going to rise. These drivers are going to go for some moves that they wouldn't have gone for earlier on, and it's going to be tense and maybe heartbreaking for some.
Totten Scarrett's into the pit lane, so here's the big moment for Vitorino as far as he's going to be making it or not. His pit stop, Vitorino's, was just 6.8 seconds, so to have a shorter one, Totten Scarrett would have to do very well. These guys are all going to get through pretty quickly, but Vitorino is going to get past. And where is Totten Scarrett? He's still in the pit lane right now. Bruno Vitorino all of a sudden is into the top 10. And he does indeed effectively replace Kyriakopoulos from what we saw earlier on in the day. And there was contact further behind. Mehmet Barakas has got into trouble here. Vitorino is going to get past George Gonzaga as well. Is losing a couple of seconds right now in 8th. We'll have a replay in a moment, but a big moment here. Totten Scarrett has just seen that top 10 disappear, but could he see it reappear as Mehmet Barakas returns to the racetrack?
What did I say? What did I say? Small little bit of contact, small little bit of argy-bargy can end in tears. And yeah, it looked like there's a little bit of separation between those cars at the point of the spin. But either way, Slice and Mehmet Baradakis now gonna find himself on the hot seat. He's still on the inside, looking to everybody who's on the outside looking in. But he is going to be feeling nervous as we get farther along. One little mistake, one little trip up, and that battling behind is really going to catch him up. And that's going to be a terrifying end for him.
And the contact was made by Gonzaga, so he'll be worried about the post-race stuff as well, I'd imagine. But that is just 6 minutes away. Rattinen looking more comfortable now with the top 5 position. At one stage, he was looking close to that cut line, but he should be fine now. Kyriakopoulos right behind Tuft and Scarrett as well, by the way. The last spot inside the, or the first spot rather, outside of the top 10. So Kyriakopoulos is going to have to come through here. Outside line he goes. And up to 11th, which will allow him to take advantage of anybody who has trouble here. Sanchez, the last one who could really make that pit stop and put himself into any danger here. Alfredo Marlo should be fine. He's nearly a minute ahead of these guys anyway. And the pit stop length that he's about to have should be absolutely fine. So Kyriakopoulos is into 11th. And now his season is in the hands of others, unfortunately, as he is outside the top 10, but waiting for those final pit stops, and at the moment too many seconds away to realistically catch 10th.
Yeah, the time running out, what I mentioned a few minutes ago, right as we had the final round of pit stops to really begin in this race, how we've got some drivers that are feeling comfortable, others that are feeling anything but. We've got some racers that are on the hot seat, others that are feeling quite comfortable in their own Tempur-Pedic. But we're starting to see those numbers begin to thin out. Right now, I would say, of the races that are currently in, feeling maybe a little bit uneasy, it's pretty much just the bottom 3 of George Gonzaga, Bruno Vitorino, and Mehmet Baradakis. And then everybody behind either is feeling tense or feeling hopeless. I think Dennis Kyriakopoulos and Alexander Scarrett have an all-right shot to do it if they can maybe close up that gap and have some drama break out farther up the road, as here comes a pit stop from Franco Sanchez.
So this is the point in the race. Marlo has already made his stop, and it's been fine for him to get out in front where he needs to be. 6 seconds, though, only for Sanchez. And look at that in the background. That's the big group. He's going to be ahead of those guys even. This is looking fantastic for Franco Sanchez-Buckley now. As he comes out of the pit lane, he is in 8th place. He's ahead of Mehmet Baradakis and Bruno Vitorino, who have suddenly formed a partnership here in the last 4 minutes to try and keep Dennis Kyriakopoulos away. That is the race. It is just over 4 seconds between Kyriakopoulos and a place in the World Finals, and a bit of an upset, really, because on paper, you'd say Mehmet Baradakis or indeed Bruno Vitorino would not make it compared to Kyriakopoulos, who in our broadcasted races for the last 3 weeks has scored a top 10 finish. Well, he's not got the top 10 finish tonight as it stands, and that's the all-important place he needs to be in 3.5 minutes' time.
Yeah, I think Dennis is always a super consistent driver, nice guy as well. I've had the privilege of interviewing him quite a lot in my time covering Radical SR10 action here on iRacing. Great driver behind the wheel. However, sometimes he can be a bit too patient in one of these events, and in an event where we've seen so many racers break out the bare knuckle fist, really start to duke it out, especially the drama at the very start. There's only so much you can do taking the patient game. So I think Dennis Kyriakopoulos at this point, he's getting closer and closer into hoping for a miracle to go down. Will that miracle happen? We'll have to find out. I think the way that would have to take place would be Baradakis and Vitorino either starting to battle too hard and running into one another, or maybe some drama farther up the road taking these racers out of it. As much as the gaps are farther, a little bit farther up the front of the field, you look from Heinz Braun slotted in 4th all the way back down to after Alexander Scarrett in 12th. That is a massive chunk of this field, all covered by less than 15 seconds.
Sanchez and Gonzaga exchange places. They'll be working. Oh no, they're fighting here. Again, not sure why. I think Gonzaga braking early there just to say, please get into line. We can't afford to drag ourselves any closer to the 11th placed position there. There'll be 2 laps to go, by the way, and indeed the final lap will be waved through next time around, and it will be taken by Alfredo Marlo. Again, 2 seconds in front of Andre Castro. I've got to say, not one of the drivers I was expecting too much of here tonight, but that's because I've never seen him before personally. But clearly a quick driver. He looks like he's beaten Andre Castro in a fair fight tonight, and that is something you don't see too often.
Yeah, and Andre Castro, an absolutely brilliant racer behind the wheel of these SR10s. I mean, he's the reigning official series champion. You got to be pretty good to do that. And so what has happened to George Gonzaga? He's dropped down all the way to 10th.
It's a slowdown penalty, I think, through the second chicane. And so now he's less than 4 seconds behind his teammate, ahead of Kyriakopoulos, who is his teammate, of course, just in 11th. I wonder... Well, yeah, let's see. I wonder if that is correct, or whether he's... no, he's slowed it of his own accord. Now, I wonder, is he going to give it up for his teammate here? I wonder. And again, I'm a little bit concerned on Gonzaga's behalf about a penalty, because, of course, he hit Mehmet Paradakis, which spun him around. So that is going to be on his mind a little bit as well here.
Yes, I wonder if maybe that's what's going on here. That, or it had to have been a slowdown from George Gonzaga, because... You know, he's a racer. He wants to get into the World Finals yet again, so I'm not sure. Even with all the teammate love in the world, there may have been some extenuating circumstances surrounding him dropping down as we get into crunch time in this event. It looks like he's giving himself a big buffer as he's currently duking out with Bruno Vitorino, the Brazilian, in the number 27 car. That's a battle for 9th, and looks like they finally single file out Gonzaga behind Vitorino.
I wonder if he's going to try and do anything here to help Kyriakopoulos get into the top 10 or not. I wouldn't imagine so, but a flash of the lights, move round to the left from Gonzaga. This is going to really slow them down. No, well, if they go side by side through the chicane, that is, but it won't do that indeed. Bit of gravel kicked up. It looks like these guys are going to make it home. Well, it's been a dramatic 45 minutes. And a very entertaining 45, I've got to say as well. Slightly shorter than the hour-long races we've been seeing in the European and America's sim racing championships this season. But this has been to decide the top 10. Immediately, 6 eliminated through their non-participation here today. Or 5 rather, and then Peter Ivany out through a first lap accident. And it may not be over here either. Gonzaga down the inside of Vitorino. It is all too late though. Alfredo Marlo will win the race and therefore be in the World Finals for 2025 alongside Andre Castro, who comes in behind him. Franit Sikorsky got caught up on lap number 1, but nevertheless makes it home comfortably with a 3rd place finish. Then in the background, Sully Reitinen is going to hold off Heinz Braun and Andreas Friedrich to the line, and there's all sorts of fighting going on a bit further down. Gonzaga and Vitorino again side by side, and you just wonder what is going on there between those two. They'll come over the line in the background. Vitorino will just beat Gonzaga on the way home, and Kyriakopoulos will fall just 3 seconds short in the end. Our top 10 is set, our World Finals are set in 2025, and it was a dramatic 45-minute qualifier.
It was action-packed from start to finish, from the drama heading through the first chicane to the strategy that was compelling from the drop of the green through to the fall of the checkered. Well done to the racers for punching their ticket into the 2025 Radical Sim Racing World Finals. Our commiserations go out to the racers that just fell short. Certainly very talented those racers are, but that just didn't have the spark here today.
So these are the 10 that will make it. Alfredo Marlo, Andre Castro, Franit Sikorsky, Sully Reitinen, Heinz Braun, Andreas Friedrich, Franco Sanchez, and Mehmet Paradakis, Bruno Vitorino and George Gonzaga. They all make it, and Kyriakopoulos unfortunately misses out just alongside Alexander Toppenskarret, Rafael Blanco, Kim Andre Bjorklund and Peter Ivany. 25 laps down. Unfortunately, he had to retire on the very first lap. Hopefully, one of them comes in to have a chat with us, one of those top 10. They can tell us how it was out there on the circuit. But our World Finals are set here, Ron. 10 more drivers added to the list. And next week, they'll be taking part in 2 races that decide the destination of that World Trophy, as it were. The AM class and the Pro class will both have a first 45-minute race, including 2 pit stops like what we've seen here. And in addition to that, secondary will be a 20-minute race, rather, with no pit stop, ending at about just after 9 o'clock European time. So that's our 2 races for the AM and Pro classes, which are split for the World Finals. And it's going to be a great evening of racing.
And now, before we move off into some interviews, I'm going to ask a slightly loaded question to you. And what do you think was the driver that impressed you the most of this World Finals qualifier field? I'd probably give a shout out to Sikorsky, who's actually there in the interview waiting area. Funny how that works. But he really impressed me as a driver that I've never gotten the opportunity to commentate a race that he was a part of. He really shined in this event, coming back from adversity and fighting back to finish on the podium at the very end.
Yeah, I'd probably go for Marlowe, to be honest, for winning the race. But as you say, Sikorsky is waiting for us. We won't keep him waiting any longer. Franek, welcome in. Good to have you with us. Congrats on third place and therefore a place in the World Finals as well, coming up next week. How was lap one, first of all, and what was your sort of an immediate response to how the start of this race was?
Certainly, it wasn't the easiest of lap ones I've had. Unfortunately, my luck struck again in the radicals, having DNFs or crashes pretty much throughout the whole season of the European Championship, and the World Final qualifier wasn't anywhere anything easier compared to the rest of the season. It certainly put me back. Already at the end of lap one, I think I had about 8 seconds of loss to P1, so I definitely was on the back foot. Had to come in for an early pit stop. I didn't really know if I'm gonna make it on fuel, pitting from lap 1, because that's not really how I imagined my race and qualifying to go. Also having a disconnection halfway through the qualifying session, which only allowed me to make 2 hot laps, which put me in P6, where I was really hoping for pole position. There was a lot of time left out in qualifying, about half a second, maybe even more. But yeah, pitting on lap 1 and then having a monstrous pace, I think having one of the best, if not the best, pace in fear, and having the consistency to practically lap the entire race within 2, maybe 3/10 of a second, the difference being. Yeah, it certainly wasn't easy, but I think that P3 is something I really deserved, as well as going into the World Finals.
Well, we look forward to seeing you there in a week's time, Franek, but for now, thanks for chatting to us and congrats on making it to the World Finals tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully see you on the World Finals.
Absolutely. Franek Sikorsky, third place tonight, and makes it into the World Finals for 2025, as does Andre Castro, who we can grab a quick word with as well. Andre, welcome in. Good to have you with us, and congrats on making it to the World Finals. As an invitational driver and not one of those who's been through the season like some of the others, how were you expecting tonight to go when you looked around at the field on show tonight?
Yeah, I wasn't really sure, honestly. It was pretty... I mean, it's still a 5K stuff, even without some of the top guys from the European and the Americas Championship. So it was a tough field, but yeah, I thought I'd just take a little bit less fuel on my first stop to be able to get some clean track and set some good laps, and then yeah, I took an extra lap of fuel just in case, because I knew it didn't really pay too much to win. So I think that probably was a bit of the difference, and then just a couple of mistakes and then a couple of frame skips, which have been kind of annoying. I've turned my graphics down, but they still happen a bit. So if anyone has any tips on that, just a couple of times at Apex it would happen. Not too bad, but obviously Alfredo was really fast. But we did it. We transferred through, and I don't know. We'll see next week. There's going to be a lot of good people, so it's going to be about keeping it clean, of course, and hopefully being near the front.
And just quickly, what have you learned from this race tonight that will take you through into the World Finals? Because this is the same format, of course, that will be used for race 1 next Sunday. Yeah,
I think, depending on what position you're in, you definitely, and maybe you're depending on your pace, you could just change it up. You could take less fuel on the first stop and then kind of have that track to yourself and maybe try to escape the pack a little bit, or you can kind of do it the other way around, kind of like Alfredo did, or you can even split it in half. I mean, there are pros and cons, like fueling light, I was scared of getting stuck in traffic, but actually I had a clean racetrack, so I was fine. So I don't know, we'll see. It depends also what the other guys do, and you never really know what they're going to do. So just some things to think about, and then also really be sure how many laps the race is going to be, so don't really overfuel like I did. So we'll see. It's going to be exciting. It's good to have a different format, and then also have the sprint format, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, certainly will. Andre, congrats on finishing second tonight and making it through to the World Finals next week, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you all. Excited to see you all next week, and for the E-Cup as well on Friday.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks very much, Andre Castro. Their second place tonight in the World Finals qualifier from Monza, and indeed we will be seeing on Fridays as well. But coming up next week, it is the World Finals from the Radical Sim Racing Championship. Hope that you'll join us all then for our 2025 finale. I've been Neil Leary alongside Ron Mounds. Ramiro Augustin is now behind the cameras. We'll all be back next week for 4 races to decide 2 champions in an AM and a Pro class in the Radical Sim Racing Championship for 2025. Hope you will join us then. But from all of us from Monza, it's goodbye for now.